Caesars Sportsbook has put out the betting odds for who will lead the league in receiving yards in 2020. Not surprisingly, Michael Thomas has the best odds to lead the NFL in receiving yards in 2020 at plus 350. So plus 350 for Mike Thomas to lead the NFL in receiving yards. But the next highest is Julio Jones at plus 700. So neither has great odds, great value, but the point is it's not overwhelming either way. What was so interesting about this, though, is I think we kind of just make the assumption that Michael Thomas will repeat again as the NFL's receiving champion. But history is actually not on his side. Michael Thomas is trying to do something that is very seldom done. The last time a receiver led the NFL in receiving yards in back-to-back seasons was Calvin Johnson in 2011 and 2012. If you look at the list, Michael Thomas, Julio Jones in 2018, Antonio Brown, T.Y. Hilton, Julio again. There's Antonio Brown again, Josh Gordon. And then in 11 and 12, it was Calvin Johnson. Before then, it happened when Andre Johnson did it in 08 and 09. Prior to that, Calvin Johnson in 11 and 12, Andre Johnson 08, 09. You got to go back to Jerry Rice in the early 90s. Jerry Rice did it twice. He led the NFL in receiving 3 consecutive years, 93, 94, 95, and he also led the NFL in receiving 89 to 90. So basically, aside from Jerry Rice, who's the greatest receiver in the history of the game, from 1960, when Raymond Berry, back in 1960, 59 and 60, Raymond Berry led the NFL in receiving yards. You have to go from 1959, 1960 with Raymond Berry all the way to 1989, 1990 with Jerry Rice before you had receivers, a receiver win the receiving crown in consecutive years in the NFL. So my point is, like, what Michael Thomas is trying to do here is very seldom done. And the one thing I'm certain of is the Saints are going to pump the ball to Michael Thomas. Despite the fact that last year he was double-teamed and triple-teamed and covered all season, he still broke the NFL receiving record for receptions in a season. But much of Thomas's production a year ago was out of necessity. When you look at the Saints offensively, Michael Thomas obviously was their leading receiver. You know the second leading receiver on the Saints team last year was? Second leading pass catcher, I should say, was Jared Cook. Was Jared Cook impressive? The two things I remember more than anything about Jared Cook last season, 2 touchdowns early in the game against San Francisco before he gets concussed and knocked out, and awful dropped passes. Like, that's what I remember about Jared Cook a year ago. He was the second leading receiver on the team. Third was Kamara, who was banged up most of the year. Ted Ginn was fourth at 421 yards. That's the next leading wide receiver, who's not even on your roster this year. Then it was Latavius Murray.
Prison.
Taysom Hill, and then Tre'Quan Smith. After Michael Thomas, Ted Ginn, who was fourth, and Tre'Quan Smith, who was seventh on the team, are your next leading receivers. They pumped the ball to Michael Thomas a year ago out of necessity. If Michael Thomas doesn't lead the league in receiving yards this year, it's because they finally got him help. It was amazing to watch last year, but you could also look and say that's a vulnerability because everybody knew where the ball was going. And yes, Michael Thomas was an absolute freak show, but how about we not make him lift a building when we could just go buy a forklift? So you add Emmanuel Sanders. You add now Ty Montgomery. You've got those 3 receivers that you feel really good about. Your 1, 2, 3. And then, okay, let's see what Tre'Quan can be. Or does little Jordan Humphrey emerge? Does Emmanuel Butler improve from year 1 to year 2? What about a wild card, an undrafted guy like Marquez Callaway who could be the blow the top off the defense, your next Ted Ginn? My point is the Saints have so many more options this year, and you still have Jared Cook, and you drafted Adam Troutman, and you still got Latavius Murray. And by the way, Alvin Kamara, who's caught 80 balls each of his 3 years in the NFL. I guess my point is, yeah, Michael Thomas is the odds-on favorite to lead the NFL in receiving yards because he should be. Because he's the best receiver in the game today in an offense that's going to pump him the football. But the record-breaking year he had a year ago, a lot of it was out of necessity because they didn't have anybody else at that position, at a wide receiver spot, who could take the pressure off of him all year. And so they had to distribute the balls to your tight ends, to your backs, just to alleviate some of the pressure off Thomas. This year, he's got a Robin to his Batman, which is going to make him, I think, even more dangerous, even if he's not getting pumped the ball as much as he did this past year.